This article considers the detailed timeline of events before, during, and after the assassination of John F. Kennedy, the 35th President of the United States. Timeline. Prelude. A presidential visit to the state of Texas was first agreed upon by Lyndon B. Johnson, President John F. Kennedy's vice president and Texas native, and by Governor John Connally, while all three men were together in a meeting in El Paso on June 5, 1963. President Kennedy later decided to embark on the trip with three basic goals in mind. The president wanted to help raise more Democratic Party presidential campaign fund contributions. He wanted to begin his quest for re-election in November 1964, and, because the Kennedy-Johnson ticket had barely won Texas in 1960, President Kennedy wanted to help mend political fences among several leading Texas Democratic Party members who appeared to be fighting politically amongst themselves. President Kennedy's trip to Dallas was first announced to the public in September 1963. The exact motorcade route was finalized on November 18 and announced to the public a few days before November 22. During the third week of October 1963, Lee Harvey Oswald started working a seasonal, full-time job at the Texas School Book Depository as a $1.25 per hour manual laborer, filling customer orders for books. Oswald had secured the job after a referral by Ruth Payne, with whom Lee's wife, Marina Oswald, and the Oswald children were living. After a marriage separation, Ruth had also separated from her husband, Michael Payne, at about the same time. On October 24, 1963, when on a visit to Dallas to mark UN Day, UN Ambassador Adlai Stevenson was jeered, jostled, hit by a sign, and spat upon. Dallas police were fearful that similar demonstrations were going to happen to Kennedy when he visited Dallas. Several people, including Stevenson, warned JFK against coming to Dallas, but Kennedy refused their advice. Dallas police, headed by Chief Jesse Curry, did increase the level of security during Kennedy's visit, putting into effect the most stringent security precautions in the city's history. Curry even deputized citizens to take action for any suspicious acts that may be pointed towards the president. President Kennedy's Texas trip schedule. Thursday, November 21, San Antonio, dedication speech for U.S. Air Force School of Aerospace Medicine at Brooks Air Force Base. Houston, testimonial dinner at the Rice Hotel, honoring Congressman Albert Thomas. Fort Worth, arrival at Hotel Texas. Friday, November 22, Fort Worth, Chamber of Commerce breakfast speech at Hotel Texas. Dallas, luncheon speech attended by Dallas Citizens Council, Dallas Assembly and Graduate Research Center of the Southwest at Trade Mart. Austin, fundraising dinner speech at Municipal Auditorium. Johnson City, weekend of relaxation at Lyndon Johnson's ranch. November 22, arrival in Dallas. On Friday, November 22, 1963, at 11:38 a.m. CST, Kennedy, his wife Jacqueline, and the rest of the presidential entourage arrived at Love Field in northwest Dallas aboard Air Force One after a very short flight from nearby Carswell Air Force Base, west of Fort Worth. The motorcade cars had been lined up in a certain order earlier that morning. The original schedule was for the president to proceed in a long motorcade from Love Field through downtown Dallas, and end at the Dallas Business and Trade Mart. The motorcade was scheduled to enter Dealey Plaza at 12:10 p.m., followed by a 12:15 p.m. arrival at the Dallas Business and Trade Mart so President Kennedy could deliver a speech and share in a steak luncheon with Dallas government, business, religious, and civic leaders and their spouses. Invitations that were sent out specify a noon start time to the luncheon, while SS Agent Lawson told Chief Curry that after arriving at Love Field and leaving at 11:30, the 38 to 45-minute trip would get them to the Trade Mart on time. Air Force One touched down at 11:39 a.m., and a presidential motorcade did not leave Love Field until approximately 15 minutes later. Dallas-Fort Worth's television stations were given separate assignments, as Bob Walker of WFAA-TV8 was providing live coverage of the president's arrival at Love Field. KRLD-TV4 with Eddie Barker was set up at the Trade Mart for Kennedy's luncheon speech. KTVT Channel 11 had originated live coverage of the president's breakfast speech in Fort Worth earlier that day. On hand to report the arrival on radio was Joe Long of KLIF 1190. Motorcade vehicles and personnel. The following lists the order of the vehicles in the November 22, 1963 Dallas presidential motorcade, along with their occupants. The lead car, an unmarked white Ford. Dallas Police Chief Jesse Curry, Sir Winston Lawson. Dallas County Sheriff Bill Decker, SAIC Forrest Sorrells. Presidential limousine, a 1961 Lincoln Continental. Driver Agent William Greer. ASAIC Roy Kellerman, in charge of the White House detail for the Texas trip. Nellie Connolly. Governor John Connolly. First Lady Jacqueline Kennedy. President John F. Kennedy. Motorcycle escorts for the presidential limousine. Dallas Police Officer Billy Joe Martin. Dallas Police Officer Robert W. Bobby Haugus. Dallas Police Officer James M. Cheney. Dallas Police Officer Douglas L. Jackson. Presidential Secret Service follow-up car, a 1956 Cadillac convertible code-named Halfback. Driver Agent Sam Kinney. ATSAIC Emery Roberts. Sir Clint Hill, in charge of the First Lady's security. Sir William T. McIntyre. Sir Jack Reddy. Sir Paul Landis. Presidential Aide Kenneth O'Donnell. Presidential Aide David Powers. Driver Agent George Hickey. Sir Glenn Bennett. Vice Presidential car, a Lincoln convertible. Texas State Policeman Herschel Jacks. ASAIC Rufus Youngblood. Senator Ralph Yarborough. Second Lady Lady Bird Johnson. Vice President Lyndon B. Johnson. Vice Presidential Secret Service follow-up car, a Mercury hardtop code-named Varsity. Texas State Policeman Joe Henry Rich. Vice Presidential Aide Cliff Carter. Sir Jerry Cavitt. Sir Woody Taylor. ATSAIC Lem Johns. Mayor's car, a Mercury convertible. Texas State Policeman Milton T. Wright. Dallas Mayor Earl Cabell. Mrs. Earl Cabell. Texas Congressman Ray Roberts. National Press Pool car, a Chevrolet hardtop. Telephone company employee Malcolm Kilduff. White House Assistant Press Secretary for this trip. Kilduff was substituting for Pierre Salinger, who was traveling to Japan with several cabinet officers, including Secretary of State Dean Rusk. Merriman Smith, UPI. Robert Baskin. The Dallas Morning News. Jack Bell. Bob Clark. ABC. Camera car number 1, a Chevrolet convertible. Texas State Policeman Harlan E. VZ. John Hofan. NBC Dave Wiegman. NBC Thomas Craven. CBS Cleveland Ryan Thomas. Ollie Atkins. U.S. Navy. Camera car number 2, a Chevrolet convertible. Driver Clint Grant. Dallas Morning News. Frank Canceller. UPI Cecil Stoughton. White House Arthur B. Rickaby. Life Henry Burroughs. TAP. Camera car number 3, a Chevrolet convertible, an employee of the Department of Public Safety. Jim Underwood, assistant news director for KRLD-TV and KRLD Radio. Tom Dillard, The Dallas Morning News. James Darnell, WBAP-TV. Malcolm Couch, WFAA-TV. Bob Jackson, The Dallas Times-Herald. Congressman's car number 1, a Mercury convertible. Driver Congressman George H. Mann, Congressman Walter E. Rogers, Congressman Homer Thornberry. Larry O'Brien, Special Assistant to the President. Congressman's car number 2, a Mercury convertible. Driver Congressman Albert Thomas, Congressman Jack Brooks, Congressman Lindley Beckwith, Congressman Olin E. Teague, Congressman Jim Wright. Congressman's car number 3, a Lincoln sedan. Driver Congressman John Young, Congressman Henry B. Gonzalez, State Senator William Neff Patman, Congressman Graham Purcell. VIP car, a Mercury station wagon. Marge General Ted Clifton, U.S. Army, Presidential Military Aide. Marge General Godfrey McHugh, USAF Presidential Military Aide. Julian Reed, Gov. Connolly's press secretary. 2 press buses, a local press car, a Western Union car, the White House Signal Corps car, the official party bus, several extra cars, and police escorts follow. Abbreviations used above include SAR, Secret Service Special Agent; SAIC, Special Agent in Charge; ASAIC, Assistant Special Agent in Charge; ATSAIC, Assistant to the Special Agent in Charge. Driver Agent. Secret Service driver agents operated through their own command chain. Driver agents were typically recruited from the uniformed White House police force. Presidential Motorcade Route. The route scheduled to be driven was as follows: left turn from the south end of Love Field to West Mockingbird Lane, right on Lemon Avenue, right at the Y on Turtle Creek Boulevard, straight on Cedar Springs Road, left on North Harwood Street, right on Main Street, right on Houston Street, sharp left on Elm Street, through Triple Underpass, right turn up ramp to North Stemmons Freeway, to Dallas Trade Mart at 2100 North Stemmons. The presidential motorcade began its route without incident, stopping twice so President Kennedy could shake hands with some Catholic nuns, then some school children. At 12:29 p.m. CST, the presidential limousine entered Dealey Plaza after a 90-degree right turn from Main Street onto Houston Street. Over 2 dozen known and unknown amateur and professional still and motion picture photographers captured the last living images of President Kennedy. Just before 12:30 p.m. CST, President Kennedy was riding on Houston Street and slowly approached the Texas School Book Depository head-on. 12:30 p.m. Shots are fired. According to witnesses, the shooting began shortly after the limousine made the sharp left-hand turn from Houston onto Elm Street. Most of these witnesses recalled the first shot happened after the president had started waving with his right hand. Most of these witnesses recalled hearing 3 shots, with the second and third shots bunched distinctly much closer together than the first and second shots, as seen in the Zapruder film. When the president first emerges from being temporarily hidden from Zapruder's camera behind the Stemmons Freeway sign at Zapruder film frame 224 to 225, his mouth has already widely opened in an anguished expression to his already having been impacted with a bullet, and his hands clench in 2 fists. He then quickly raised his fists dramatically in front of his face and throat as he turned leftwards towards his wife. Secret Service agent Clint Hill testified that he heard 1 shot, then jumped off the running board of the Secret Service follow-up car directly behind Kennedy. Hill then rapidly ran towards the presidential limo, and then a shot hit Kennedy in the head, opening up the right side of his head. As the limousine began speeding up, Mrs. Kennedy was heard to scream, and she climbed out of the back seat onto the rear of the limo. At the same time, Hill managed to climb aboard and hang on to the suddenly accelerating limo, and Mrs. Kennedy returned to the back seat. Hill then shielded her and the president. Both of the Connollys stated they heard Mrs. Kennedy say, "I have his brains in my hand." The limo driver and police motorcycles turned on the sirens and raced at high speeds to Parkland Hospital, passing their intended destination of the Dallas Trade Mart along the way, and arriving at about 12:38 p.m. During the shots, Governor Connolly was also struck, and his wife pulled him closer to her. He suffered several severe wounds that he survived. A bullet entry wound in his upper right back located just behind his right armpit, 4 inches of his right fifth chest rib was pulverized. A 2.5-inch sized chest exit wound. His right arm's wrist bone was fractured into 7 pieces, and he had a bullet entry wound in his left inner thigh. Although there is controversy about exactly when he was wounded, analysts from both the Warren Commission and House Select Committee on Assassinations believed that his wounds had been inflicted nearly simultaneously with President Kennedy's, in the theories that the two men were struck by a single bullet. The commission theorized both men were hit nearly simultaneously between Zapruder film frames 210 to 225, while the committee theorized it happened at frame 190. During the shots, a witness, James Teague, was also injured when he received a minor facial wound. The Main Street South curb he had been standing 23.5 feet away from was struck by a bullet fragment that had no copper sheath, and a fragment of the concrete curb or a bullet fragment struck Teague on his right cheek. At Zapruder frame 313, Teague's head top was located 271 feet away from and 16.4 feet below President Kennedy's head top and the limousine's front windshield, and its pushed nearly vertically straight upwards. Sun visors were in between the president and the impacted curb point. The bullet fragment that struck the concrete curb was never found. Immediate aftermath. Lee Harvey Oswald was encountered by unarmed Dallas policeman Marion Baker in the Texas School Book Depository Building's second-floor lunchroom 74 to 90 seconds after the last shot. Baker was assigned to serve as a motorcycle escort for the motorcade, riding just behind the camera cars. He testified that the first shot he could hear was fired after he turned from Main Street onto Houston Street, and had traveled approximately 60 to 80 feet along Houston as he approached the Houston and Elm Streets intersection. Baker stated that he recognized the first shot he could hear as the report of a high-powered rifle, and that he thought the shots had originated from the building either right in front of me or the one across to the right of it. He said he also noticed pigeons take flight up from the roof of the depository building and start flying around. Baker then quickly drove to the corner of Houston and Elm Street, parked his motorcycle, then looked westward into the aftermath of persons screaming, running and laying on the ground. Then he listened to a radio broadcast by Chief Curry saying, "Get some men up on that railroad track." Then he ran to the entrance of the Texas School Book Depository, entered the building, and, led by Building Superintendent Roy Truly, made his way to the far northwest corner of the first floor. Once they reached they started yelling for someone to send an elevator down from a higher floor. When there was no response, he and Truly began climbing the stairs, with Truly in the lead. Upon stepping out onto the second floor, a movement caught Baker's attention towards the lunchroom vestibule that was across from the stairs. Baker drew his weapon, went to the outer lunchroom vestibule and confronted Oswald, but Baker released Oswald when Oswald was was identified as an employee by Mr. Truly. According to Baker, Oswald did not appear to be nervous or out of breath. Truly said that Oswald appeared startled when Baker aimed his gun at him. According to the Warren Commission, Oswald was next seen by a depository secretary as he crossed through the second-floor business office carrying a soda bottle. He left the Texas School Book Depository at an estimated 12:33 p.m. through its front door. The Warren Commission theorized that Oswald had traveled from the sixth-floor easternmost window and hid an 8-pound Italian-made 1940 Carcano 6.5mm rifle equipped with a 4-power scope along the way. The rifle was reportedly discovered near the sixth-floor northwest corner by a Dallas police detective at 1:22 p.m., having been placed down between stacks of boxes balanced upright on the lowest edges of its barrel and wooden stock. After being discovered, the rifle was photographed before being touched and was filmed while it was being inspected by the police crime lab supervisor. Estimates of when the depository building was sealed off by police range from 12:33 to 12:50 p.m. The Dealey Plaza immediate area streets and blocks were never sealed off, and 9 minutes after the assassination, photographs show that vehicles were still driving unhampered down Elm Street, through the crime scene kill zone. After leaving the depository, Oswald walked 7 blocks before boarding a bus. When the bus got stuck in traffic, he got off, walked to a nearby bus station, entered a taxi, took it several blocks past his rooming house, and then walked back to the rooming house. He arrived at his rooming house at around 1:00 p.m. According to his housekeeper Aileen Roberts, he left 3 or 4 minutes later. She last saw him standing and waiting at a bus stop outside the rooming house. At 1:15 p.m., Dallas police officer J.D. Tippit was shot dead near the intersection of 10th Street and Patton Avenue. This was 0.86 miles from Oswald's rooming house. 13 people witnessed the man shooting Tippit fleeing the immediate scene. By that evening, 5 of the witnesses had identified Oswald in police lineups, and a 6th identified him the following day. 4 others subsequently identified Oswald from a photograph. After the Tippit murder, Oswald was witnessed traveling on foot toward the Texas Theater on West Jefferson Boulevard. About 1:35 p.m., Johnny Calvin Brewer, who worked as a manager at Hardy's shoe store in the same block as the Texas Theater on Jefferson Boulevard, saw Oswald turning his face away from the street and duck into the entranceway of the shoe store. His Dallas squad cars drove up the street with sirens on. When Oswald left the store, Brewer followed Oswald and watched him go into the Texas Theater movie house without paying while ticket attendant Julie Postal was distracted. Brewer notified Postal, who in turn informed the Dallas police at 1:40 p.m. Almost 24 policemen, sheriffs, and detectives in several patrol cars arrived at Texas Theater because they believed Tippit's killer was inside. When an arrest attempt was made at 1:50 p.m. inside the theater, Oswald resisted arrest and, according to the police, attempted to shoot a patrolman after yelling once, "Well, it's all over now," then punching a patrolman. President Kennedy. At Parkland Hospital, a Catholic priest was summoned to perform the last rites for President Kennedy. Dr. Malcolm Perry, assistant professor of surgery at UT Southwestern and a vascular surgeon on the Parkland staff, was the first to treat Kennedy, and he performed a tracheotomy, followed by cardiopulmonary resuscitation performed with another surgeon. Other doctors and surgeons who gathered worked frantically to save the president's life, but his wounds were too great. At 1:00 p.m., CST. After all the activity had ceased, and after the priest administered the last rites, President Kennedy was pronounced dead. Personnel at Parkland Hospital Trauma Room No. 1, who treated the president, observed that the president's condition was moribund, meaning he had no chance of survival upon arrival at the hospital. "We never had any hope of saving his life," Dr. Perry said. "I am absolutely sure he never knew what hit him," said Dr. Tom Shires, Parkland's chief of surgery. The Very Reverend Oscar L. Huber, the priest who administered the last rites to the president, told the New York Times that the president was already dead upon the priest's arrival at the hospital and had to draw back a sheet covering the president's face so that the last rites could be given. Governor Connolly, meanwhile, was soon taken to emergency surgery where he underwent 2 operations that day, although President Kennedy was pronounced dead at 1:00 p.m. CST. The official announcement would not come until more than half an hour later. After receiving word of the president's death, acting White House Press Secretary Malcolm Kilduff entered the room where Vice President Johnson, who was constitutionally now the president, and his wife were sitting. Kilduff approached them and said to Johnson, "Mr. President, I have to announce the death of President Kennedy. Is it okay with you that the announcement be made now?" The new president ordered that the announcement be made only after he left the hospital. When asking that the announcement be delayed, Johnson told Kilduff, "I think I had better get out of here before you announce it. We don't know whether this is a worldwide conspiracy, whether they're after me as well as they were after President Kennedy, or whether they're after Speaker McCormack or Senator Hayden. We just don't know." At 1:33 p.m. CST, Malcolm Kilduff entered a nurse's classroom at the hospital filled with press reporters and made the official announcement. A few minutes after 2:00 p.m. CST, President Kennedy's body was removed from Parkland Hospital and driven straight to Air Force One. The removal occurred subsequent to a 10 to 15-minute angry confrontation between Kennedy's special assistant Ken O'Donnell with Parkland Hospital doctors and medical examiner Dr. Earl Rose, along with a justice of the peace. The removal of President Kennedy's body may have been illegal, as it was done before a forensic examination could be performed by the Dallas coroner, which was against Texas state laws. The assassination of the president was, at that time, listed on the books as a state-level crime and not a federal one, and as such legally occurred under Texas jurisdiction. To this date, however, no official legal body has ruled on this matter.